We're now going to take a look at spreadsheets, starting off with cells, sheets, and operations. Spreadsheets are made up of a number of separate worksheets. Now, each worksheet is like a big matrix of cells or big rectangular area into which you can put information. Each of the intersections of a row and a column indicate a particular cell. So we could say that the worksheet is made up of cells. And each of those cells could contain potentially text, which the program would consider to be a label, or it could contain a number or a formula, which the computer or the program would consider to be a value cell, so that it can do some calculations with that particular type of information. A typical worksheet would contain 256 columns, and they are assigned letters, and the first column would be letter A, and it would go down through the alphabet and then start over A, B, A, C, and continue on, and eventually winding up at IV. So that's 256 columns. Typical sheet would have 65,536 rows, starting at the top and going to the bottom. So it has significantly more. Most worksheets would have significantly more rows than they would columns. This is a typical type of worksheet, and this is actually in Calc, but it looks very similar in Excel and other programs. And we can see the column letters across the top. We can see the row numbers down the side, and we can see that you have a number of different menus and so on. One to pay particular attention to is the one that indicates where you are. If you look at just above the worksheet and to the top left, you'll see that it says A1, and that indicates the particular cell that we happen to be in at this particular point in time. Now, when you select a different cell on the worksheet, and you can do this by using the arrow keys on your keyboard, or you can click on a particular cell using the mouse pointer, that cell will be indicated as the active or the current cell in a couple ways. One is you will notice that the column letter and the row number highlight to show you what column and what row you happen to be in. As well, a darker border will wind up going around the particular cell that you happen to be on, the active cell. We can see in this example that we've switched to a new cell, a new active or current cell, and we're now looking at cell B3, and you'll notice that that is indicated by the column highlighting and the row number highlighting as well. Also, if you look in the upper left-hand corner just above the sheet, you'll see that we're now indicating that we're in cell B3 there. And that actually is another way that you could switch to specific cells by actually typing in that location, a specific cell spot, such as, say, Z23, then you would be taken to that particular location on the sheet. So that's another way you could potentially move around. So whatever cell you have clicked on becomes the active cell, and you can move around the spreadsheet by clicking on different cells, although after a while it often becomes easier just to use the arrow keys on your keyboard, the up arrow, down arrow, left and right, to move around if you're not going very far on the sheet. You're also able to click on the scroll bars, both the horizontal scroll bar and a vertical scroll bar on your sheet, so that you can go to another location and then click on a cell in order to highlight that. Now, if you want to select an entire column or an entire row, you can just click on the column letter, or if you're selecting it for a row, the row number, and when you do that, it will select the entire column or the entire row. If you put your mouse pointer between two columns or between two rows, you'll notice that the mouse pointer will change to like a line with a couple arrows on it, and if you click and drag at that point, you're able to change the width of the particular column you happen to be beside, or the row that you happen to be dealing with. So that's just some way you can select rows, columns, and potentially change the sizes. Typically you don't change the size of the row very much, but often you will need to adjust exactly how wide a column happens to be. Here we have a column that's been selected. And keep in mind, when you've clicked on a column, such as we've clicked on column C here, that column is highlighted all the way down, or selected all the way down to the 65,000 mark. So it's right to the bottom of the particular sheet. Now, alignment in a spreadsheet works a little differently than it does in a word processor. Word processor, you're typically dealing with a page, so alignment has to do with where text is appearing on that page. But with a spreadsheet or worksheet in particular, you are looking at where information is with regards to a particular cell. So if you tell in a particular cell, you say, I want that cell to be formatted so that the text is aligned to the right. It will just move to the right of the cell, not to the right of the particular page. You're also able to change the cells so you can have them wrap text, which would mean that text would go text that's too long for the cell potentially would be going down on the next line, and you can also change the orientation on how that text appears. So we select a cell, in this case cell A5, and then select Format and Cells in order to begin to make some changes. If we're going to make a change to the alignment, we could select Alignment, and you can see there that we could then change the horizontal position. We could change the orientation of the text, and we can actually ask or tell the computer that we want the text to wrap around so that the text will stay within the cell but just sort of go below, actually make the row a little bit wider in order to fit all of the text in. You can change the border of any particular cell and also the style of the lines around the selected cells. And again, with all of these features, don't forget you need to get that cell or cells selected first before you implement the particular feature you're trying to implement. Here we have an example of changing the borders of a cell or a group of cells. We can see the different types of styles are available in the center, so we can choose exactly the kind of thickness or the style of line that we want to have. And then we can implement that over on the left-hand side. We can either choose a predefined or default setting. There's some there for the entire square selected, or lines on the right and left, and so on. Or you could just click in the user-defined area and say, I want a line at the bottom and I want one on the right, but I don't happen to want a line at the top or the left. So you can sort of define how you want the borders to be set up for the particular cells that you have selected. The cell color is the color that's going to be in behind the particular text that you have in the cell, so just the background to that. And here we are on the background tab, and you can see on the left that you could select a number of different colors, or you could leave it as it's currently set to no fill. So you could click on that and say, well, I don't really want to fill any particular background color, and then click OK. Now when we're dealing with numbers or formulas that are calculated in a cell, so basically value cells, as opposed to a label cell, which is just text to tell us about something. When you're dealing with a value cell, you're able to alter the way that the numerical information is displayed. So we can, for example, change the number of places that would be displayed after the decimal. We can also specify a particular type of numerical style. So we might say that we want it to be in currency, which is going to give us the dollar sign, comma, so it's going to put comma separator in the thousands place, and so on. So we have different types of styles that we can implement. Typically a worksheet comes up with a general style when it starts, and that general style doesn't have a fixed number of places after the decimal. The general style typically will just give the amount of decimal places needed in order to display the particular number that's been put into that cell or been calculated in that cell. Here we are formatting cells, and again, remember that the cells would have had to have been selected before this already, and then you've gone into the formatting of cells. And specifically, here we're looking at the Numbers tab, and we can see we have a number of different types of categories we could select from: number, percent, currency, and so on. And in this case, it looks like we're selecting the number category in the general format, but there are lots of other formats, as you can see there, even in the number format. And we can also look down below and we can see how many places after the decimal we're actually going to have set up for this particular format of numerical information. Spreadsheets use a fairly typical order of operations. You'd be familiar with it from basic mathematics. Typically, brackets, of course, is first, so everything within brackets needs to be evaluated before we move on to anything interacting with what's in the brackets. Exponentiation is the next level, and then multiplication and division, and finally addition and subtraction. Keep in mind that with your multiplication, division, your addition, subtraction, say addition, subtraction, it's going to do those from left to right, and the same with the multiplication and division. It'll do all those from left to right before it comes back around to do addition and subtraction. Here we have an example of a formula in the cell. And if we look at it, it starts with an equal sign. We always use an equal sign to indicate that a formula is going to take place. We've got 23 divided by 2 multiplied by, in brackets, 7 plus 5 put to the power of 1. So if we think about how this is evaluated, it would have to evaluate what's in the brackets first. So it's going to add 7 plus 5. Of course, if the brackets weren't there, then that would be the last thing that was added on. So 7 plus 5, and then we look at it and say, well, then it's got to go to the power of 1, which is silly because it's not going to do anything. But that would occur next. Then we would be looking at the multiplication division. So it's going to divide the 23 by the 2, because that division symbol is closer to the left-hand side, and then multiply that result by the result it found for the information or the numbers on the right-hand side, and then that would be the final result for that particular cell. As soon as you move off of a cell or you press enter, you'll be taken to a different cell, and we'll see that the result of the formula will appear in that cell. Now, you're always able to go back and look to see what the formula was, but if you're not on a cell, you're not going to see the underlying formula. You're just going to see the result of that formula, and in this case, the result of the formula we put in is 138.